Morning, everyone, and welcome to what is now our 14th BC Poultry Symposium webinar. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining us this morning, and a big thank you to all of our sponsors as well. Today, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Joy Campbell from APC Proteins presenting the benefits of starting broilers with spray-dried plasma. Dr. Joy Campbell received a PhD in nutritional sciences from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Campbell has worked in research and development at APC for more than 20 years. She has focused on the role functional animal proteins play in the health of domestic animals. Her work documents the significant change in animal health in response to administration of functional proteins in the diet. Her work has led to the development of several innovative products to several industries, including the swine, poultry, ruminant, aquaculture, and pet food industries. And so we do have Dr. Campbell's permission to record and post this webinar, so it will be also available to view at a later date on our website. We will also likely have some time for questions after the presentation, so please feel free to type them into the chat box as we go along, and we will go through them time permitting. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Joy Campbell.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kyler. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today to share with you this information. Let me get my screen started here. Okay. As I said today, I really appreciate the opportunity to have to share this information on the use of spray-dried plasma in the broilers. So part of it is what happens when spray-dried plasma is fed to young chicks. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. Cover a lot of different examples, but just to kind of overall what we've been seeing is improvements in performance, improvements in the overall health. We'll talk about some different measurements as we think about health measurements, improving during tolerance and stress and different diseases. So we're going to focus on showing different type of stressors, whether different production stressors that we've experienced, and showing how the plasma was able to help during these different situations. Talk about reducing mortality or things that we've seen, and then helping to develop the immature immune systems. The other thing is easing problems with ABF type systems. We've got some different examples, and hopefully when you leave today, you'll kind of have a feel for what the different effects that we have seen when feeding spray-dried plasma to the young chicken. So first of all, I want you to think a little bit about what is the plasma. If you're not familiar with this type of a product, it's a protein-rich feed ingredient. It's obtained from the blood of healthy pigs or cattle that's destined for like the human consumption. It is spray-dried, specifically maintaining the functionality of these proteins. And when I talk about functionality, as you'll see, we refer to them as kind of a functional protein, having the biological action beyond just the nutrition it's providing. We'll cover what some of the nutritional specs are, but these effects that we're seeing is once you've equalized the nutrition in the diet, you've equalized the protein levels down to the amino acid levels, we're still seeing these responses above and beyond that. So that's kind of how we think of having function, having biological function. So when fed to animals, as I said, we've seen spray-dried plasma helps to improve the performance and overall health. We've seen this not only in broilers, but we've also seen it in swine, ruminant, and in other type of situations. The other thing I want you to think about is kind of the mode of action of plasma, and that's kind of hopefully to explain a little bit of why we see some of these different effects. And so let's focus in over the left side when we think about the, let me get my cursor here. There we go. If we focus over here on the left side, we've got the, when you think about you got stress, you get cytokines that start happening. You can have low, you may have the more subclinical type challenges occurring. You've got challenges occurring when you get early immune development. The gut microbiota might be changing. Amino acid digestibilities are different between different things, different ingredients. So when you think about having this effect, and if we're able to show that the plasma is able to help with the efficiency, help with moving the nutrients towards production, helping with the gut health, and we'll talk more about kind of some of the digestibility that we have seen. And then again, when you've got the gut in a better state, you're able to reduce a lot of the potentially inflammation. You may be able to, when you incorporate in these proteins using a little bit less soybean meal, it's a good protein source. You could replace some of the other protein source or other low fermentable proteins, which then leads to over onto the right side here is what are we looking for to come out of this? Is we're hoping the animal is performing better. You're going to see better feed efficiency. You're going to have better weight gain. You're going to have lower mortality. They're able to withstand or maybe to get through the stress in a better situation. I mean, we all know that the stresses occur, but how can we mitigate some of the negative effects? Get them off to an early development and better growth. Again, better gut health, and then again, what that all relates to is better production, better yields, uniformity that you're looking for in your flocks. So different ways to think about how these proteins can help you in helping to support the immune system and helping them get them through the challenges. So the primary uses of plasma in poultry industry today are, again, to attain an efficient immune response to help the overall performance and health, really support that animal. When you think about other areas where they could utilize it is low quality. We'll talk about that today to help a better performance and get better health too. Reducing the high mortality you may be experiencing in different type of challenges. When we're reducing the dependence on various antibiotics, different ways again to manage. We'll show you some comparisons with or without growth promoting antibiotics. When facing difficulty of the different diseases, and also to reduce the negative effects of the different stress, whether it be vaccination stress as we think about, housing stress. We're going to show you some of this of like density, changing the density of them, and then also going into having the heat stress as another type of example. So first of all, I want to kind of show you this. If you're not familiar with plasma specifications, this is a kind of a picture shot of what the specs are. It's about a 77% crude protein, ash at about 10%. We've got a typical analysis as you're formulating, whether it be for the calcium and the minerals that you would have, ME numbers. And then the other part that we have down here, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail, is the digestibility. As we formulate the diets to optimize the use of the different ingredients, we always like to look at digestibility. A lot of times digestibilities are measured at 21 days. But what we're looking at here is we also have a digestibility data set at day 10. We did this work with Dr. Carl Parsons at the University of Illinois because we're recommending to be feeding this in the very early diet of the broiler. So therefore, we wanted to see, is there a difference between day 10 and day 21? And I'll highlight what we see. Really not a huge amount of differences, but we do have both sets of numbers available for people depending on how they want to formulate their diets. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. If you're looking for information, that would be readily available. So if we think about digestibility, one of the first things we think about when feeding an ingredient is, can it help with the digestibility? So as I said a few years ago, we did this work with Carl Parsons. He presented it at the meetings. And we were comparing with this with soybean meal with either a 10-day-old or at 21 days old. And we know early on digestibility of the soybean meal usually isn't as good. And as you get older, the digestibility usually goes up, which we see at anywhere from 83 to 87%. But what we see with plasma, it's a very digestible ingredient. Even at day 10, we were 95.5% digestibility. And at 21, we moved up about another point, about 96.6. So very highly digestible ingredient in the early, when more the gut is still early period developing. The other thing we had looked at was looking at nutrient. This is some work done by Polo et al. In 2020, where here we were just looking at the total diet, feeding the plasma at 2% inclusion, looking at dry matter, organic matter, crude protein, and ether extract. And what you'll see is we did see a increase in the nutrient digestibility of crude protein. This is again the total diet. Nice improvement in the organic matter. We didn't see as much differences in the ether extract, more of a numeric improvement. So that was kind of our first look. Now we have utilized this. Then we wanted to go into it with Dr. Parsons, as I said, a little bit more detail. And this situation, what we wanted to do is look at it again, comparing the ages. So here we were using either 2% plasma and then assessing them at either day 10 or 21 days of age. So what we have here is we look over to the onto the right side here is with digestibility. This is the day 10 data. We see improvement in digestible energy and dry matter digestibility going up. The fat digestibility was down in this situation at the early stage. NDF up, and also the organic matter. And then as we come down to the 21 days, we see a little bit different profile. Now we've got the dry matter digestibility is up. The fat digestibility is pretty flat, but seeing the improvements in the digestibility that we had, again, improving the overall digestibility, a little bit different between day 10 and day 21, but showing this improvement, which helps to explain why we're seeing these differences and improvements in the overall performance. Now, like I said, this was done specifically in broilers, but we also have seen these responses in other species, such as in pets and also in swine. So it's a definitely response that we have seen to overall helping of the digestibility of the diets. The next thing to think about is, as we look at this, is thinking about, how much are we kind of looking at? So I try to put this this kind of chart out as kind of a cumulative feed intake, kind of your standard intakes across the different recommendations you see. And what we kind of see is getting it in early. Now, everybody has different type of feeding programs, depending on what region you're from, what part of the world you're from. Some people will use a pre-starter than a starter. Some people will use more of a starter, but that starter may be for 7 days or 10 days or 14 days. And it all kind of, so what we're trying to target here is kind of how many grams are we trying to get in? Looking at about this 3 to 4 grams into the bird. So depending upon, as giving an example here, if you're only feeding that first diet for 5 days, then we'd recommend formulating it up to like 3%. 7 days, you're at about 2%. 10 days, maybe at about 1. The other thing that you'll see is the theme, and this is kind of a general recommendation, is depending upon the stress that you're experiencing, you may still want to increase more because of the stress, and you'll see it as we go through this presentation. These stressors can also affect the performance, and how can we help to utilize these proteins to help mitigate some of those effects. So when we think about the target use, again, that 3 to 4 grams, this is a starting point. And I say it's a starting point. It's a good place to start, and then you can evaluate, how do I need to adjust? Where do I get more value out of this? And we generally have seen anywhere from about 1.5 to 3% improvements in the feed conversion and weight gain. And approximately about 1 point of feed conversion pays for the initial investments, and depending on different responses that you see. So about a 2 to 1 ROI. So if we go in to kind of show where we kind of came up with that 3 to 4, this is some work where they fed various levels. If you look over to the right, and they were looking at the productive efficiency factor. And here we're seeing the curve, and you see it kind of tailor off. So around that 3 to 4 kind of topping out. And again, this is under kind of a typical kind of production, not a heavy stress situation. So all these things are different things to consider when you're looking at doing and evaluating how much to utilize. It's a starting point. So let's go into now some of the different responses we have seen. We've talked a lot about, the digestibility and, the different effects that we see there at the gut, but then what's the performance look like? This is data looking at where we would say they were unchallenged broilers, kind of just a typical production situation. And we were looking at different levels. They weren't under a lot of stress. We had different levels. We were fed it either for 4 days, 7 days, or 10 days. And we had different inclusion levels. And what we were targeting, if you look down here at the bottom, like for 4 days, we did 1.5 grams or 3 grams. Day 7, either a 3 or a 6 gram target. And then day 10, again, either a 3 or 6. After that time, they all got fed a common diet, followed them out for 42 days. This work was presented at IPVS back in 2019. And what you see is there's quite a bit of variation. You see the significance note here. We see the increase, some of the best with the 7 day, with the 3 grams. But again, not a lot of stress, but you do see an increase in the body weight gain. So in this situation, we weren't seeing as much differences of the levels. However, we go into different things, and I'm going to show you, we'll see some different things and different responses we see as levels. But again, kind of hitting that target there of showing a nice improvement in growth. And this is under an unchallenged situation. So still getting the benefits of improving the overall body weight gain. Another question we get a lot about is, okay, these are proteins. How do they do going through the pelleting process? There was a series, and this is the older work, series of work that we did published back in 2006 in conjunction with working with Kansas State University of manufacturing different diets for us and looking at different processing conditions. In this series of experiments, we were looking at different pelleting temperatures. We were looking at whether we had fat in the mash prior to going through the dye versus not. So a lot of different things. And all I'm going to do is highlight here is one specific, one of the series of the studies. This one kind of brings it all together. We had a control pellet and a plasma containing pellet, and essentially the pelleting at about 85 C in this situation. We actually did go up to, I think it was about 95 C and still did not see negative effects. Then this one we had an 85 C or running it through an expander. And what we see is we see an increase with the body weights that were noted with the plasma containing pellet with the 21 days, at 21 days. But then if we take our control expanded versus the plasma, again, we see a further increase. So we can see even the differences of why some may want to use expanded diets, other people are using pelleted, but overall showing that the did not negatively affect the benefits seen with plasma on then this situation being as a growth measurement. So now we go into, we've talked a lot about, feed processing. Again, we're not concerned about that in the poultry diets. But then now let's go through some different examples of looking at what is happening when you're using these proteins and having different kind of scenarios or different stressors that the animals are experiencing. This was a publication done by Walters et al., published in 2019, Journal of Applied Poultry Research. And here what we were looking at was to evaluate the impact of plasma during the starter phase and looking at it on growth performance, flock uniformity, and yield. And I'm not going to go through all the different measurements, but just to highlight a little bit of some of the things that we saw, again, published out there in the Journal of Applied Poultry Research. We had the experimental designs, we had 36 pens, and it was a 2x2 factorial. So we're looking at the main effects of plasma or the main effects of BMD. The plasma was fed at either 0% or 2% for 10 days. And then the BMD was either with or without BMD. Replicated pretty well, 9 replicates. Pen size was about 22 birds per replicate. So let's first look at day 10. We look over to the left side, we're looking at the body weight at day 10. We've got the graph set up. We've got the left, we got the control, which would have no plasma, no BMD. We would expect that to have the lowest growth body weights at day 10. Then we see the benefits of the BMD going up from 198 to 207. Then we have just plasma by itself at 217. And then the plasma plus the BMD, a further improvement up to 223. The statistics we're looking at the bottom is looking at the main effects of BMD and plasma. There was no significant interaction, so we could look at the overall main effects. We see a good response with the BMD as expected, and we also see a good response with the plasma, seeing a further improvement with the plasma. And as I note here, with the two together, an additive type effect, so it would indicate different modes of action. We then look over to the right side and we're looking now at feed conversion ratio in the first 10 days. And again, the control there having the highest FCR and starting to improve it by about 4 points with the BMD, having a further improvement with the plasma alone, and then a few more point improvements with the plasma plus the BMD. Again, we did see, we did not have an interaction between the two of BMD versus plasma, but did see a response improvement with the BMD and also an improvement with the plasma. Now this is showing what happened at day 10, kind of where this period was where we were feeding 2%. They then went on to common diets after that out to market age. They were followed out for 41 days. So now let's look at what happened. Here we see the increase again, our control that had no BMD or no plasma. We see the an improvement with the BMD. When we look at the BMD versus just the plasma alone, the overall body weights were fairly similar. And then when you put the two together, an additive effect again, up to about a 2.75. So as I've always said, kind of looking at these, you can, depending on what your goals are with the different things, BMD, they got a response, plasma got a response, even if you want to use both of them, having a further improvement with an additive effect. We look over to the right side, we're looking at a weight adjusted feed conversion for the overall period. We essentially, again, have the highest FCR with the control, and then seeing a further improvement with the BMD. Plasma, fairly similar, again, with the BMD, but then again, with the two added together, having a further improvement in improving overall feed efficiency. Again, main effects, we did see a main effect of BMD, and we did see a nice improvement main effect significantly with plasma. Again, there was no interaction between the BMD and the plasma. So again, as I say, looking at how you want to utilize these, what kind of programs you're trying to put together, it's an option and a tool to utilize either with BMD or without, but again, with the two together, even having a further improvement. So as we kind of concluded from this study, as I've mentioned several times, there was no significant interactions between the two, between both the BMD and the plasma. The BMD increased the body weight, reduced the feed FCR, and increased the yields. And then also what we saw with plasma, and I didn't go through all the other data, is that we did see the increase in body weight. We saw the improvement in the FCR. We see an increase in the weight without giblets, and then a tender yield also. And additionally, what we did see with the plasma also was an improvement in flock uniformity. Not very many studies were we able to individually weigh the birds, but in this one we were, so we could really evaluate. And we've seen it before, not only in broilers, but in pigs, we've seen it where the uniformity of the either the herd or the flock is improved when utilizing these proteins. Now to go into some other kind of challenges. This is older data. This was published back in 2006. And this was kind of early on when we were evaluating what could these proteins do to help out. And so the study design was to look at like a control diet, and then what we saw, continuous feeding of continuously feeding it for 14 days, dropping it down to a lower level for the next 14 days, and then a lower level. So continuously throughout the whole period of production. And then what we called was discontinued, only feeding it up for 14 days in this situation, and then going to a common diet. The study was not designed to have this happen, but it's like what happens sometimes in production is necrotic enteritis broke in the flock that we were dealing with. And you start to see that the controls, we started to lose the controls, and we continued to lose them out to day 35. But the interesting thing, and the reason I bring this up, is the birds that were only fed for 14 days versus continuous, we didn't see any differences in the mortality. We were still getting the benefits of these proteins early on and being able to maintain the survivability. Now, I will say, if you look at this publication, we definitely were down on growth, and body weights were definitely down because it was a very severe necrotic enteritis challenge. But I think it also shows the carryover effect, the benefits of feeding it early, getting it into that early diet, and then getting hit with a very severe challenge and being able to show that it did still have some benefits. So again, depending on the severity and the economic, the best performance was with the ones that were continuously fed in this severe challenge. Now, this is an example of a enteric type challenge. Now I'd like to move to more of a respiratory challenge. And this was one of the questions we were asking is, we know it helps, as I said in the beginning, helping to support and maintain the immune system. One of the things we wanted to look at was to kind of move to a different mucosal surface. If we're orally feeding these proteins, when we're seeing these responses in the gut, we would expect to see the overall improvements. But what about if we're truly trying to show that we're affecting the overall and supporting that immune system, orally feeding these proteins, but then having a challenge that's at a different mucosal surface, such as the respiratory? And that was a study that we had done back in 2004, early on. We were using turkey poults. In this situation, we were delivering the proteins through the water line because we expected that when we challenged the animals, we weren't sure how much they were going to eat. We didn't know how severe it would be. And then we followed the turkey poults for 2 weeks after challenge. The group that we was working with, we challenged them. And they thought maybe a couple of days later we would see the big difference. We didn't see a big difference in the first 2 days post-challenge, but what you start to see is the survival with the controls. We continued to lose the control birds, whereas the turkey poults that were fed the proteins we lost a few and it leveled out at a 94% survival versus 63% survival. And really, when I think about this, this really shows what can happen sometime in production. You have something starting to happen with a challenge. It wasn't so serious, but then it just started to spread as the animals were spreading it between the flocks within the pens. So showing again the differences that we see, and showing now being orally consuming the proteins and being able to benefit a different mucosal surface and helping during a respiratory challenge to help reduce or mitigate some of the negative effects associated with that. Another example, and this was a field trial that we'd done with a North American poultry producer with inclusion body hepatitis. They were having it happen on a regular basis, and so they were wanting to look at it. And this work was presented in 2019 at the IPVS meetings. And essentially, we had a couple different experiments. We're looking at closeout information from barns. You got experiment 1 and experiment 2. In the black bars, you've got the control diet, and then the yellow is kind of the plasma containing diet. They were fed 2% plasma for 10 days. We did see an increase in experiment 1 with average daily gain, a bigger difference response with experiment 2. Again, different type of challenges occurring, but just as an example of seeing that improvement. Mortality was reduced in both experiment 1 and in experiment 2. And this was again where inclusion body hepatitis was happening. It was not a specific challenge. It was just a naturally occurring thing, and showing the benefits again of a different type of challenge under field conditions and the benefits of feeding just in that first period to help benefit them towards the end of closeout. Another controlled study that was done, this was work done by Besky et al. Of the Australian group, and they were looking at salmonella challenge. And again, trying to look at that with compared to feed antibiotics, and then also looking at different levels. So what they had is they had a group that was salmonella challenged, and they had feeding of either control, 1 or 2% of the proteins and feed antibiotics. And I think it went about 10 days is what it was. And then no challenge control to kind of, make sure you understand how could the feed conversion been for if they were under no challenge in good situation. I kind of highlight what the challenge was, and then again, the unchallenged birds did go ahead and receive 2 mils of the broth just to kind of go through the stress of that challenge. And what we see here is feed conversion at the very end of day 35. We've got our controls that did not contain the proteins or the feed antibiotic. We then see an improvement with 1%, a further improvement in this situation with 2% of the proteins, similar to the in-feed antibiotics, and then also similar to actually the birds that had not gone through a challenge with the salmonella. So again, showing the benefits, options that people would have in order to use it as tools to manage through different type of challenging situations. Just to give you another example of a salmonella challenge, this was done by Blue and Vecina. That was published, again, presented in abstract form in 2019 at the IPVS meetings. These were 2 different experiments that they were conducting, and they were looking at different types of salmonella. We had on trial 1, Salmonella typhimurium, and looking at, again, their mortality. It had 4 cages per treatment with about 12 birds per cage, and following them essentially for 14 days. We see a dramatic, significant reduction in mortality when utilizing the proteins and including it into the diet. And then also with the Salmonella enteritis, again, seeing a big decrease going from 12.5 down to 0% mortality in trial 2. So different group, different examples of different type of challenges that they're doing of some salmonellas and some naturally occurring ones. And here showing the benefits of reducing the mortality in these situations. Now let's think about not only a disease challenge. We've talked a lot about the salmonella and necrotic enteritis, the Pasteurella multasa with Delta and fowl cholera, the inclusion body hepatitis. Now going a little bit more to the environmental side of challenge, we think about heat stress. And this was a study that was conducted with the University of Arkansas. It actually just published last year by Ruff et al. In the Journal of Applied Poultry Research. And here we're wanting to evaluate, again, utilizing these proteins during a very severe heat stress. We really wanted to magnify what happens with it, would it really impact the heat stress? So in this situation, we had a control group, no heat stress, so we could understand the impact of heat stress. And then we had the control diet with heat stress. And then we had a heat stress group that was fed the proteins at 2% in the starter and grower and 1% in the finisher. Again, this was delivered through the feed. We did not know how severe the heat stress would be, if they would back off feed. So we wanted to make sure and kind of see really what the effects were that we were noting. We had about 480 broilers. They were about roughly 44 grams. We did have 20 birds per pen and then 8 pens per treatment. And the pen number was limited by, we had controlled chambers. So we were able to control the environment in a well manner where we had continuously heat stress starting at day 22 with temperatures going up to 35. And then again, we had the no heat stress group was maintained at the 24C. We looked at body weights, feed intakes throughout the study. We also, when you think about what happens with heat stress, and this happens in all type of animals, and I'll give an example of like even runners, when you think about when you get heat stress, your gut sometimes will start to open up. And that's where, I mean, like for runners, if they get overheated and things, you can sometimes go into toxic shock because the gut's opening up and whatever toxins may be in your body can start having problems. So if we're able to help show the benefits of these proteins and helping to maintain the gut and improve the overall gut, then we should, under this situation, be able to show an improvement in gut integrity. So that was one of the objectives and questions we were wanting to ask here. And then also, if you're able to help support the immune system, when the body has to respond to different stressors, they're definitely having, the whole body is responding. I mean, proteins turning over, bone starts to turn over. And when you start having bone turnover, how is that affecting the bone breaking strength under stress situation? So those were different questions we wanted to ask within this stress situation and see if we were impacting these different measurements. So let's first look again. I'm going to highlight, you can look at all the details of the research on this. As I said, it's all published out in the Journal of Applied Poultry Research last year. So if you look at the body weights at day 42, we can see that the heat stress was dramatic. We saw our control diets at about 2.9 kilos. And then the heat stress controls going down to about 1.7 kilos, a significant difference in reducing body weights because of this heat stress. But then under this severe of heat stress, we look at the diets, the broilers that were fed the plasma, and we see that we were significantly able to increase. I mean, albeit not close to what the controls were, but sometimes we're not able to control sometimes the environment as well we'd like. We were able to help mitigate some of the negative effects. We took it back up to about a 1.8 kilo. So essentially seeing that by feeding it early on, and this was fed early on, again, it was fed throughout the time, but getting them during this heat stress, we were able to increase body weight by about 8%, about 135 grams extra compared to the animals that were fed the heats, that were under heat stress on the control diet. But then, as I said, we also wanted to look at intestinal permeability. And so here what we see is we have the increase in the permeability. We're using a marker. So essentially the birds were gavaged with marker and then looking at how it's coming across the gut. Is the gut leaking? And we have our controls. The measurement was about 218 that we was measuring. Again, with the heat stress, which is the black line, we see a significant increase of this marker, the FTSE, coming across and being picked up. So showing that the gut is leaking, which is what you would expect with a heat stress situation. But then the broilers that were fed the proteins, the plasma proteins, again, we didn't bring them back to the control of such as no heat stress, but under this heat stress, we were able to help mitigate some of the negative effects of helping to reduce the gut leakage. So again, feeding the plasma during the heat stress, helping to mitigate part of the increase in this gut permeability that was happening. And this was all measurements done at about day 42. And then one of the last measurements I alluded to is looking at bone strength. We definitely again see that when the controls, and you have the heat stress control, you definitely did decrease the bone breaking strength, which is what we would expect. Again, when you have a heat stress situation, the negative effects that you see is you potentially are having to have more bone turnover. If you start seeing the bone turnover, you may have more issues with the the legs, the strength of the bones. And so that's what we was able to measure, is that you definitely did decrease the strength of these bones as measured by bone breaking strength. We then look at the group that was heat stress and fed the plasma proteins, and again, able to mitigate some of the negative effects. Again, not back to the controls that had not gone through any heat stress, but being able to reduce the negative effects of the heat stress in this situation, being able, as measured by the reduction in the bone strength. We did see it down from the controls, but compared to the heat stress group, control group, we saw an increase in bone breaking strength, so essentially stronger bones. And we have seen these, we had research many years ago done in pigs where they were looking at DEXA scans in pigs and looking at bone density. And there also we did see, when utilizing these proteins, we did see an increase in bone density. And so we wanted to kind of follow up in a more detailed measurement in broilers and see if there could be an effect here. And yes, there was, of being able to improve the overall bone strength. So as we think about, again, this study, I think I lost my screen here. Just a second. Back to the screen. Somehow I hit the wrong button. Okay. Back to the screen of the heat stress, we did see a reduction in the overall body weights and the feed intake. We did see the different things that we saw with the increasing the feed conversion, gut permeability, and then feeding the plasma during this heat stress. We did see that the effects of the heat stress were on, that they definitely did affect. We were able to help to mitigate some of the negative effects on the body weight, the negative effects on the bone strength, and the negative effects on the gut permeability. I'm going to see if I can move my thing here. There we go. Okay. Now I'm kind of looking at a different thing. We talked early on, I talked about low quality chickens. This was some different research, a couple of different trials that were done using chickens that were with different weights at placement. Trial 1 consisted of 3 groups of chickens that were fed either control, or in this situation, 2% plasma for the first 7 days. That was their starter program. They had low weights, about 36.6 grams with access and feed 12 hours after hatching. Had another group, which they called the high weight group, and these were averaging about 44 grams, still having access to water and feed 12 hours after hatching. And then they also had a low weight group, which is 36.6, with no access, essentially as if the birds had to be transported for a long period of time and didn't have access to the water or feed. So essentially kind of simulating going through a fast 12 hours after arrival to the farm. They didn't quite get after the placement, so about 24 hours after hatch. This work was presented at the IPVS back in 2020. And then if we looked at the trial 2, was a group with broilers that were fed the control 2% again for 7 days. And here they had kind of what they called a medium weight group of 40 grams, and again, still having access to water and feed after hatch. So what do we see? They kind of threw them together of the different effects that we see. So here we're looking at the chickens with the different body weights at placement, whether it be 36.6, 40, or 44 grams, and then fed either a control or a 2% plasma diet for the first 7 days. And what we see is we can look over here at the cross, and we see the differences of the body weights of trial 1 with the 36.6 of the control versus plasma. We see an increase in body weights, a significant increase. With the medium weights, the 40 grams, we see again a significant increase going from a 2.8 up to 2.9. And then in trial 1, back to the trial 1 there, where we had the 44 grams, going from, didn't see as big a difference, 2.94 to 2.95. So again, differences of seeing with the different placement weights and showing the different responses. The other thing that they looked at is, again, we've talked a lot about digestibility and helping to improve the overall gut. So now we're looking inside the animal. And they were looking at this by real-time morphometry, where they were looking at taking tissue samples and calculating the number of villi per 1,000 micrometers squared, and then calculating an area per micrometer squared. And we got the different treatment groups that were done in the trial 1, where we had the lightweight birds of 36.6, we do see a significant increase in the number of villi, and which then equates to increasing the overall area. So think about, improving the overall absorptive capacity, which gives, I think about, if you're helping to maintain that gut and develop it and keep it in a better state, explains a lot of why you see improvements in digestibility and you see improvements in the overall performance. As we look at the 44 gram, which were the heavier birds, again, even though we didn't see as much differences in the overall body weights, we did see a significant increase in the number of villi. And we also see a significant an increase, I should say, in the area per micrometer squared. And then what about the ones that were fasted? Here, the fasting, we see a numeric increase and also an increase in the area. So again, overall, looking at overall p-values, looking at the differences that we see of being able to show that with these proteins being fed in this early period, being able to improve the overall number of villi and also the area. The other thing they looked at here in this study was looking at kind of at the end, what about the body weight gain, feed conversion, carcass weight, carcass yields. This kind of gives you a bigger picture of the overall work. And again, with the low body weights, was again the 36.6, we see a numeric increase in body weight gains. The feed conversions, we really saw no differences in feed conversion between all of the body weights. Carcass weights were up, carcass yield was up, the skin pigmentation, which is what they were looking for, was a little bit numerically up, not seeing as big a differences. And then looking at breast scores, still albeit low, but seeing sometimes as we looked at different weights, seeing a little bit improvements there. And we look at the high, which was the 44 grams, we see again numeric improvement in the body weight gain, no differences in feed conversion. Carcass weights up, carcass yields numerically up. And then the low weights, the fasting, no differences at this weight in the body weight gain, but seeing a differences numerically up in the carcass weight and numerically up with the carcass yield. So again, seeing as we look at thinking about utilizing them in lightweight chicks or different type of chicks and how to again utilize these proteins. One last thing of thinking about a different type of challenges, this one is stocking density. And this was a study where we were looking at trying to see, okay, what if we could increase the stocking density? There was a lot of different measurements done here. So essentially we had 10 birds per square meter without plasma, and then showing the effects of increasing the stocking density. We're looking at 14 birds per square meter, and this is looking at the overall productivity index, kilos of bird per meter squared. So it takes into account, body weight differences, mortalities, et cetera. How much were we producing per meter squared? And that was the goal of this research. And so you can see that, yes, we did actually have an increase. When you increase the stocking density, you are producing more kilos per meter squared. But then we also want to say, okay, when that happens, if you look back at some of the data, we saw body weights maybe weren't quite as high as we'd hoped. Mortalities were affected. But then if we're able to help mitigate some of those effects, what happens if you put plasma in it? So we had a couple different levels of plasma. The details are in the report, where we were feeding it out and seeing, doesn't matter. In this situation, we didn't see a big differences between the levels that we fed in this with stocking density challenge, but it's overall showing that utilizing these proteins again as a tool under a different type of stress, this one being stocking density, we did see a significant increase in the amount of kilos bird produced per meter squared, rolling it all up together. And again, that was published back in 2012. So hopefully, as we've kind of gone through this, you've kind of thought about, learned a little bit more about what are some of the different effects and applications we've seen. We think about, helping for developing these birds, having an overall efficient immune response, helping with gut health, helping during different stress situations. And we saw even in clinical health, you don't always have to be under a challenge, but showing differences with or without the different feed additives, supporting the early development and to get these broilers off and going. And then also different kind of stress conditions, whether it be environmental. We just got done talking about stocking density, thinking about even vaccination programs and how the stress can occur from those different things. And then we did get into discussing some of the disease and the high challenge situations, such as the respiratory challenge, the severe necrotic enteritis, the heavy heat stress, and how the benefits were seen during those type of challenges. So to kind of conclude it all, as we think about the use of these proteins in poultry to improve the overall health and performance, this kind of summarizes it, helps to maintain an efficient immune response, improving, again, that performance, which was the ultimate goal. How can we do better with the birds and keep them healthier and keep them in a better state? The other part is, helping with these low quality, helping get them going, helping with or without different type of feed additives. So can it be an additive effect to get even the benefits of both things together? And again, reducing the negative effects of various vaccinations with stresses. We talked about the housing stress, whether it be the stocking density, et cetera, and then also the heat stress example. So overall, we've seen this improvement in getting through mitigating the negative effects, anywhere from 1.5% to 3% feed efficiency improvements, weight gain on the same, about an average of about 1.5% to 3% improvement in feed efficiencies, and then going, ranging in mortality difference, but we've seen anywhere it's up to 50% reductions in mortality. So it's a wide range of different things we've seen, and hopefully you can see it kind of utilizing as a tool to help with different things to help mitigate things and help the overall performance. So with that, I'd really like to, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to join you here today, even though it'll be virtually, but hopefully someday we'll be all in person again, but enjoyed it. And thank you very much. And hopefully let me know if you have any questions or follow-up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. It was all really interesting. Just looking here at the Q&A, and we do have one question. It says, thank you for SDP as a feed ingredient. What has been your experience over the years with any concerns raised about using a cross-species blood product and unforeseen TSEs or other zoonoses? Have you and others managed this?
Yeah, I actually was working in I've been with APC a long time when the BSE thing, a lot of those things. I mean, it's considered it's gone through the safety. We've done a lot of safety work. It's a safe product. We have utilized it across multiple species, and it's readily utilized in swine. In the United States, it can be utilized in the ruminants. There's a lot of safety information. If you want to reach out to me, we would be glad to provide a lot of the safety information on this product for you, and not only for broilers, but also for other species.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions here. Again, that was, all very interesting. I especially, enjoyed with the heat stress component of it, given, what we experienced here in the Fraser Valley last summer with the heat dome, and summer right around the corner again. So yes, thank you again so much, Dr. Campbell. We really appreciate your time and your expertise today. I want to thank our sponsors again as well, and just another reminder that our next webinar is scheduled for March 16th at 10 o'clock, titled Understanding Poultry Plant Condemnations, Prevention and Control, and that will be with Dr. Gigi Lin. So thank you again, everyone. Take care, and we look forward to having everyone join us again next month.
Great.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Take care.